Hello and welcome to Afrocorp Conversations. This is episode 2 of Afrocorp Conversations. I am your host Chiderabila Ojuku, and Afrocorp Conversations is powered by CBO Legal and Business Solutions. In this episode, we'll be exploring the discourse family business, governance and growth, lessons Africa can no longer ignore. The purpose of corporate governance is actually necessary for the growth of African enterprises. In fact, over 80% of African businesses fall within the category of small and medium enterprises. Systems that no longer fit should be re-examined and redesigned and not worshipped. It does not mean Africa is backward. And this is Afrocorp Conversations, rethinking governance for African enterprise. From our last conversation, we established what corporate governance is about, the history of corporate governance as it relates to Africa, and how the corporate governance regime we currently have in Africa came to be. Now, in this episode, we are taking it further to understand the business landscape and realities in Africa and how we can tailor corporate governance and compliance frameworks to fit the African realities. It is trite that business activities in Africa are majorly undertaken by SMEs and family owned businesses. In fact, over 80% of African businesses fall within the category of small and medium enterprises. And over 70% of these SMEs are family owned. And these businesses account for over 80% of employment and economic activity in Africa. That cannot be overlooked. As a form of background to this episode, we need to reiterate the realities of businesses in Africa. A large share of African businesses operate informally or as family owned SMEs without formal structures, documented procedures, or governance frameworks in place. As a result, governance and compliance systems designed for larger formal companies struggle to penetrate the real business landscape as we have it in Africa. Most SMEs often have informal relationships, undocumented decision making, and do not adopt governance systems because they see these as external impositions rather than tools that support growth. And this informality undermines transparency and accountability because records are not auditable, access to finance because lenders require documented governance structures. African business landscapes dominated by family SMEs and informal enterprises need governance and compliance systems that work with the structural realities and not frameworks imported without adaptation. Most family businesses and SMEs do not fail by the second generation because of poor markets or lack of demand. They fail because of poor governance of family relationships, including weak or non existent succession planning. And in Africa, compliance is often characterized by being enforcement heavy, penalty driven, fear based. And what is the result? Businesses deliberately remain informal to avoid regulators. Compliance is perceived as an enemy, not an enabler of growth. Let's look at this practically. In many African jurisdictions, it is compulsory for companies to have an auditor on record that will prepare the audited financial statements every year, as well as a company secretary. Yet, many businesses can barely afford to retain a company secretary. And this is why they resort to agencies that offer company secretarial services. And even then, the cost remains prohibitive for many. I have personally had a startup reach out to me some years back to act as a pro bono company secretary because they simply could not afford one, even though the law requires it. And this was a business with a solid idea and a viable business plan, but without the financial capacity to meet formal governance requirements under the current regime. The same challenge exists with auditing. Many African businesses cannot afford to retain an auditor annually. In Ghana, for example, from my personal experience, engaging an auditor to audit financial statements can cost not less than 30,000 Ghana cedis. Depending on the volume of work, it could be higher than that. The critical question then becomes, how much is the business profit? Formalization is expensive, and as a result, many businesses choose to remain informal simply to survive. And we must remember that these businesses still have employees and contractors to pay, operational costs to meet, and markets to compete in. Every regulatory process attracts a fee. Changes in directors, changes in secretaries, changes in shareholding, change of auditor, filing annual returns, all of these attract fees, plus the service charge, plus the VAT, plus ancillary fees, and the original cost multiplies quickly. Then we layer on tax obligations. To many SMEs and family owned businesses, these requirements are perceived as threats to business sustainability and not as safeguards. So businesses make a rational choice according to them, survival over formalization. However, survival in this instance inhibits sustainability and longevity, which is what corporate governance can help family businesses to solve. In regulated sectors, even approving a director can be a long, arduous process. Our systems are often slow and inefficient. So this forces SMEs to cut corners just to meet business timelines because delays can cost business opportunity. In the light of this, what shifts should be made in our compliance and corporate governance framework and systems? Well, we should shift compliance from punitive to developmental. Regulators should adopt a comply and grow approach. And where these are in place, we could record high formalization rates as well as ease of doing business improvements. Again, simplification and digitization must reflect SME capacity. What is wrong now? Digital compliance portals assume that these businesses have legal teams, accountants, constant internet access. However, the contrary is the case. SMEs face complex forms, multiple agencies, duplicated filings, and this has to change. There should be a single SME compliance dashboard with simplified language, one stop regulatory filing that could make this process easier, simpler, and more approachable for these businesses. Again, we have to align tax, labor, and corporate laws with SME cash flow realities. Currently, we have high upfront tax compliance costs. Furthermore, we should also embed governance education into SME ecosystems. There are a lot of businesses that don't understand governance, corporate governance, legal compliance. And that is one of the purposes of this platform, Afrocorp Conversations, to educate businesses, to educate SMEs, business owners, directors, and everybody out there on corporate governance, legal compliance, its implication in the African landscape, how it can help build and advance African businesses and ensure that African enterprises remain a growing concern. Currently, governance is taught in boardrooms, if it actually would be taught. In corporate seminars, that would be if the owners and the directors attend the seminars, but not where SMEs actually operate. These conversations on what corporate governance is about, compliance, how it helps your business, and all that are had where SMEs actually don't operate. So we must change this to giving governance education through, let's say, chambers of commerce, trade associations, faith based and community business networks. These systems, these groups that you are more likely to meet owners and operators of small and medium enterprises. Now, we should also use practical tools like checklists, templates, short guides. This is like a training session to help them to move from where they are to where they need to be, governance wise. Designing governance and compliance that fits the African business realities and circumstances would go a long way in increasing formalization, improving access to finance, enabling succession, reducing business mortality, supporting intergenerational wealth, and strengthening nation economies. Governance is not the problem. However, badly designed governance is the issue. For Africa, governance resilience requires context adaptation, not simple adoption of foreign models. Now, we would like to make a proposition, but before I get there, I would like to ask a critical question. Is the growth of regulation in Africa outpacing our ability to manage it? Here is the context behind our question. Across Africa, businesses are increasingly confronted with overlapping regulations and multiple regulatory bodies, often with unclear or duplicative mandates. Instead of clarity, many enterprises are left guessing. Laws that were meant to simplify or modernize governance frequently introduce new layers of complexity. A new reporting requirement here, an additional compliance checklist there. Over time, these layers accumulate and compliance becomes burdensome rather than enabling. In light of today's conversation, we propose a practical way forward, one that ensures that family businesses and SMEs can access governance and compliance structures that are tailored to their realities while still enjoying the benefits of corporate governance. Like earlier established in the previous episode, we need corporate governance and compliance to ensure business sustainability and longevity, as well as responsibility, fairness, and transparency in the African business landscape. However, the truth is this: many businesses in Africa do not have the financial capacity or managerial sophistication to comply with governance regimes designed primarily for large corporations. As a result, they are effectively locked out of the very benefits governance is meant to provide: longevity, accountability, sustainability, and access to finance. We therefore propose the creation of a distinct business category known as family businesses, supported by its own governance and compliance codes, frameworks, and regulatory institutions, deliberately designed to serve its unique purpose. Specifically, we propose the establishment of a family business governance body alongside family business governance frameworks that are fit for context and scale. This would involve building governance and compliance institutions, systems, policies, frameworks that recognize and formalize trust based business systems that simplify requirements for smaller and family owned firms, that reward good governance with improved access to finance and markets, as well as integrate cultural, social, and community norms into governance practices. In our next episode, we will delve deeper, unpacking this proposed business category, its governance codes and regulatory structures, and the transformative impact it
LinkedIn.
could have on the African business landscape. We'll call it a day in this episode. We look forward to hearing from you, your feedback, your comments, your questions, and your contributions. Kindly drop your feedback, your questions, your contributions in the comment section, or you can reach us through DM in our various social media platforms: YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, or you can also send us an email via afroconversations@gmail.com. It has been a pleasure, and we look forward to the next episode and taking this conversation further. Again, we are open to partnerships that reflect the passion and the vision of this project. Till next time, I remain your host, Chidera Abdullah Ojukwu, and this is Afrocorp Conversations, powered by CBO Legal and Business Solutions. Till next time, bye for now. Welcome to Afrocorp Conversations, rethinking governance for African enterprise. Afrocorp Conversations is powered by CBO Legal and Business Solutions and hosted by the founder, Chidera Abdullah Ojukwu. This podcast streams on Spotify and YouTube. Short clips will be available on Instagram and Facebook. You can follow Afrocorp Conversations on LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, and Instagram to keep updated with new episodes.